because I'll definitely check that out. So we kind of touched on it a little bit. Like I said, the last time we spoke on the podcast, you were working on a documentary.
Right.
So what is the status of your documentary?
The interesting thing about the documentary, and that has been the hardest thing I've ever had to take on. And the reason being, and I'm going to be really honest, is I have to trust outside entities in a way that is uncomfortable for me. And when it comes down to it, I have learned to not micromanage and not try to do all the parts. When you build a car, there's a production line, assembly line. And when you build a film, it's basically the same thing. And the problem with, and I'll just speak from my individual experience, what I consider to be the challenge over the 10 years that I've been working on that film, thereabouts 10 years. So it's a few things. Number one, discipline of yourself and the people that you choose to go into business with. That is a major issue because one thing about me is I work constantly. So when I'm not gigging, especially with the film, I was constantly going through footage that was shot on phones and shot on small cameras or GoPros or whatever, and just looking for the right moments and notating those start times, end times, parts that want to be used. I mean, I'm really detailed with notes. But when you have editors and videographers that just don't have the same love for creating something, it's a problem. And I've run into that with at least three major production partners, to the point that I got so frustrated, I said, I'm just not going to worry about it. I'm just going to just kind of put this thing away. And then at one point, I think we talked about this last time, at one point during the production, my father passed away, and he was the person that got me involved. I was really working to try to get the film done before he died. And that didn't happen. And it kind of knocked me for a loop. So I put it down for a minute. And then it just got to a point where, we're negotiating with Netflix and HBO at different times. And you've got these production partners that are just not doing what needs to be done. And then it becomes arguments. And I just became disenchanted with the experience. So I said, right now is probably not the time based upon the experience that I'm having for me to do this film. So I'm going to put it away. And that's what I did. And luckily enough, again, creativity by COVID, that's a hashtag. COVID really made me circle back to everything. And I am trying to decide now, and I'll probably have a decision within the next month on if it's going to be a documentary or if it's going to be a docu-series, which has now become a lot more exciting because that means that we don't have to do all of this heavy lifting at one time. And we can do the film in segments, which is pretty cool. So the film is still coming. There's a whole other story about the tequila we can talk about too, that I haven't even mentioned that on social media as to why I walked away from that. But I kind of went in some different directions. And so it made sense to put it down for a while.
Okay. Well, I've been one of your biggest fans, so I was just like, oh, well, that got pushed back a little bit. So I just kind of wanted to get clarity on the project, but I'm excited. And I think docu-series is kind of probably better just because of the sign, like you mentioned, Netflix and all of these other streamers. That's like the format that people are
consuming content, right?
Yeah,
right.
So it might work out for the best, to be honest.
100%. Yeah, and it's when you're not a company. I mean, I am a company, but don't get me wrong. I mean, essentially, I'm a one-man gang with hired guns. There are things, I've never taken that type of heavy lifting on. And quite frankly, when I went into it, I didn't know all the ins and outs of, again, it's one of the reasons I'm making this book about DJing, because a lot of DJs enter the industry and they don't know the ins and outs. Well, I didn't know the ins and outs about film. And that was very foreign to me. And when you have all these ideas and you're a detailed person, you can run into trouble really quickly. And so, when my career started taking some different routes, the ending didn't make sense anymore because what I was originally writing for the ending, I was no longer going to do. So I think it was good that I sat down because now the ending is entirely different and I prefer this ending. So it'll come. I just had to figure out docu-series, and I'm with you. People consume content via segments, and I think that makes the most sense.
Awesome. So great. Well, yeah, also, yeah, I did want to bring that up. You were part of like all of these people that were starting their own lines of alcohol, and you said
Yeah.
tequila, and and there's a lot of celebrity brands out there. Of course, the most prevalent one that's hitting social media is the Rock's
Yeah.
Terramana.
Yeah.
You can't escape his. And then you had Aviation Gin by Ryan Reynolds.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about that endeavor. I know that's kind of been on a reevaluation kind of thing right now, but that I was looking forward to that too.
Yeah. I literally walked away from that. And there's I'm going to tell you a story that I've not told on social media, and only those closest to me know about what happened. But I was originally a brand ambassador for Moda Tequila. And Moda Tequila was the world's first black tequila, and black by process, not black by food coloring. And once the 6-month promotional campaign was over, when they wanted to renegotiate, well, rather than asking for the same thing I had, I renegotiated for a bit part of the company. And with that, that allowed me to really kind of, get inside the machine and really kind of ramp up the way that I would kind of introduce this tequila to the world. And I really marshaled my resources to get the entertainment industry excited about it. And we were going, there's so much that, you don't put your entire life on social media. So there's so much about what happened that people don't know. So I'm going to give you the brief synopsis. So about 2.5 years into that arrangement, in January of 2018, I went down to Florida and met with some of the principals of the Orlando Magic and owners of this major ad firm down there about partnering with us to basically raise money to take it national. And so we were in the process of doing that. And I was going through a funding round of $5 million for Moda. And when I came back and I talked to my partner, I was just like, I was super excited. I was on top of the moon. The meetings went great. Everyone loved me and my partner. And came back. And when I was telling my partner about what took place, because he didn't go to that meeting, his energy seemed a little off. So at any rate, he's like, Rose, to tell you what, man, he had the company probably for about 8 years before I became involved. And not a lot had happened, but a lot of money had been sunk into it. So he says, Rose, I'll tell you what, you seem like you really want to do this. How about you guys just buy me out? Which threw me. But then I thought about it, so that's not a bad idea. So I went back to the finance people. I said, this is what he's thinking. And so we had started the process of making that happen. And then I get an email from Mexico, from our distiller. And he tells me that my partner is no more. That was the term that he used. And I didn't know what that meant. And he told me that my partner had taken his life, which, it's hard to describe to people your response to something like that. Because there's a personal response and then there's a business response because the paperwork wasn't done. So, and then, long story short, no will, now I'm dealing with the estate. And you don't even know if you want to go forward with the project. So fast forward a little bit. The situation with the estate doesn't go well. So I go back to the partners and I say, listen, why don't we just walk away from Moda and start our own brand? And they like the idea. So me being me, chose a bottle, chose a name, trademark, write a business plan, my usual thing. So we're in the process of launching this new tequila, which I'll keep the name to myself right now in case I circle back to it. And then our president decides to tweet about tariffs on Mexico. And I'll never forget it because it was the summer of 2019 and he sent 2 tweets. And it completely torpedoed the business because you have to think the people that were financing this were doing it as kind of like a pet project, but they weren't from the tequila industry. They weren't even from the alcohol industry. And neither was I. So you have all of these newbies, and then we hear that the president is going to put tariffs on Mexico, and our entire operation is in Mexico. Needless to say, the money went away. And once that happened, I was like, you know what? I don't have millions of dollars to sink into this to risk. So, I walked away from it myself. And it was one of the most hurtful things for me. And that's when, anyone who follows me, there was a time that I really kind of pulled back from social media. That was the time. Because going into that new tequila brand was kind of moving me away from DJing. And I was ready to move away at that point. So, yeah, the tequila thing, I don't know that I'll ever go back to it, but I will never say never. But that's why. That's what happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nothing.
That was a soap opera.
Yeah, yeah. Real life kind of happened there.
Yeah.
Um, well, I'm sorry to hear about your partner, because
Thank you.
uh, a theme that I've talked about on this podcast is my personal mental health, and others that have gone through some pretty deep stuff. So I'm
Right.
sorry to hear about that, and that's why I think it's good to talk about it, because if we just keep stigmatizing it, things are
Right.
going to continue the way they are. But well, I hope it works out for the best. Like I said, I think maybe it might down the line, but we'll have to see. So that's exciting, though, that
Yeah. I feel
you
like
took that there's a
well,
possibility.
well, here's the thing. So I am a mental health advocate too, and that'll be another podcast, and you and I can sit down and talk about, especially after the album comes out, and you'll understand why I said that later on. But um, yeah, it's one of those things where I would rather, this is someone that I had been working with for years, and he was right beside me, and I didn't catch the signs at all. And I'll always have that'll always be tough, realizing that in the end, the things that he was struggling with, had I just locked in on it a little bit more, I could have probably have assisted, hopefully. But that being said, I feel like, I'll just say this to anybody who wants to try to go into the spirits business. You have to have deep, deep, deep pockets, or you're not going to make it, period. And that is not something that I realized. I really thought you could really leverage social media and influencer marketing and really scale up pretty quickly. And that's just not the way it is, And so as much as I enjoyed that experience, unless I had, the backing of at least 25 million, I don't think I'd ever do that again.
Well, I mean, even if you look at the list of celebrities that have their own lines, they're the celebrities that are like on the Forbes